Hello and welcome to the Addicts podcast. I'm your host, Jamar. Today's episode 214, and we're going to be interviewing Niki. How are you doing today, Niki?
I'm great. Thank you, Jim. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm excited to do this as usual. So let's dive in and get started. First question I ask everybody is, tell me about your childhood and growing up.
Okay. So I am a sibling of two and grew up with a mom who was alcoholic. And my father passed away when I was really young.
How young?
I was four. My dad was killed, and my mom kind of really was a really good example of, do whatever you have to do to take care of your kids.
May I ask what happened to your dad?
Yeah, so my father was murdered. He was really sick, and he left our home thinking he was going to die. And long story short, he got a girlfriend, and she had an estranged boyfriend, and he followed them home one night, and out of jealousy broke in, shot my father, shot her, and then felt bad and scooped her up and took her to the emergency room, dropped her off, and then he drove around the corner and blew his brains out. And so, interesting how later on that played such a significant piece of my life, because my mom had just told me he died because he was sick. And when I found out later, around 12, which corresponded with about the first time I took a drink, I was so angry at God. How could that happen? How could, so really interesting. And here's the thing, my sister, she's not an alcoholic, and she grew up in the same circumstances, but yeah. Childhood was chaotic, very chaotic.
Well, I can only imagine finding that out. 12 years old, you're so young, and it's hard to understand, like you said, why someone would do that. We don't, at that young age, we don't realize that there's just some people that they're not well and they do crazy
Well,
stuff.
I had been told he was sick my whole life. And so I found life insurance papers that said that my dad died from a gunshot wound to the head.
Okay.
Just couldn't understand,
Yeah, that must have been hard.
Yeah. So
you took your first drink around 12?
It was actually, my mom had gotten married to a man, and it was at her wedding. And I drank some champagne, I believe, and blacked out first time I drank,
Really?
Yeah.
How much did you drink? Do you remember?
I have no recollection, but I do remember, really interesting, all these years later, we have pictures of, my mom drunk and me drunk. Yeah. And,
Your mom was okay with it?
I'm not really sure that my mom was aware.
Okay.
I think there were a lot of things that happened that, my mom was so engulfed in her own alcoholism and her own life, that a lot of things, she just missed. She just missed. So I'm sure that probably my mom came to the United States when she was 7 from Germany, and they drank. My grandfather and my grandmother were both functioning alcoholics, and beer and wine were a part of their daily routine. So I don't think it was probably anything really out of the ordinary, maybe. Yeah.
That's a very young age to start drinking.
Mm-hmm.
Our brains are so in the process of molding themselves, and we're in the process of becoming who we are.
Yeah. And and I struggled with that too, because I just being bounced around. We moved, I couldn't even count how many times we moved, when I was a child. So always like struggling to make friends and fit in. And when I drank, I didn't have to fit in because I was okay by myself. And so it just started this lifelong pattern of searching to be okay. And if I wasn't okay, I knew that if I drank, I was.
So at 12 years old, so you had your first drink at your mom's wedding. When was the next time you drank after that?
Probably wasn't immediately. It was, I was in 7th grade, and, you know, marijuana was being introduced to it. And so, you know, friends were, you know, smoking pot. And really interesting though, I remember planning. So I remember like, you know, premeditating the next time I would go out and drink, and premeditating when I would be able to go and hang out with my friends and get drunk. You know, so it wasn't like an everyday occurrence, but it was on my mind every
So your
day.
friends were also drinking at 12?
Yes.
So everybody got started really young.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was the culture. I grew up in Miami Beach, and you know, but my mom had moved us to Florida because I'm from Cleveland, Ohio, originally. And you know, this culture of just this fast life, partying and hanging out, and um, yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy young.
Mm-hmm.
I was lucky. Well, even I started pretty young. I was 17 or 18, because even that's, I think anything under like 25, but
Mm-hmm.
they say that's when your prefrontal cortex, which is, you know, your rationalization and reasoning, really becomes mature around 25.
Yeah. Well, so, you know, later in life, I was a chemical dependency counselor for 5 years, and learning how the brain actually develops. And when you're introducing addictive substances to your brain at that young of an age, how all of a sudden, you know, your pleasure centers rewire themselves. So, you know, I don't believe that I knew how to self-soothe or how to give myself, you know, to feel good, because I had just learned that the only way to do it was with substances.
Yeah, it takes away, like you said, from us learning how to deal with problems ourselves
Yeah.
without the
Oh
aid of
yeah.
something.
I had no problem solving skills, and yeah. So
So it really made you more social and fit. You felt like you fit in more, or you said you were also more okay by yourself, you said?
yeah, so you know, I described myself as this chameleon. Like I didn't fit anywhere, but I blended in. You
Okay.
know, I never felt like I fit. And you know, I struggled early on with my sexuality, and I couldn't, you know, I came from this, my mom was very religious, belonged to this very zealous church. We couldn't go to the movies, we couldn't do all this stuff. And
So are you gay? And that's one of the things you also
yes,
about? Okay.
yes. And so I learned this message that I was not okay. And you know, and I trying to figure that out as well. Um, and I just, you know, I think I just compartmentalized that and just said, you know, that's not who I am. That's not who I am. And, you know, a lot of things of I just drank, you know, like in order to deal with I never processed any of that. I mean, I don't think I fully processed that until the first time I was in the absence without any drugs and alcohol. And that wasn't until I was 36.
Wow. I mean, I've thought about before, if I was gay, how would I go about telling people? I would be terrified, because
Mm-hmm.
I would just, it's a natural fear of not knowing how someone's going to react,
Yeah. Yeah.
especially
You
if
know, and
they're religious.
I lived my life as a heterosexual woman and tried to fit into these relationships, was married twice, and you know, just all the while checking the boxes for everybody else.
Yeah, I mean, I have a cousin that's gay, and I'm so happy, because the first thing that went through my mind is, oh my God, my aunt and uncle are so religious. But their minds opened up and they're fine. They never had a
Mm-hmm.
problem with it. They said that's our daughter, and that's it is. And she still goes to church and everything.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
up to her how she handles that. I mean, I find
Right.
that a little weird. Um,
There
because
are,
I
you
just
know,
couldn't go somewhere where I wasn't accepted. I would feel like, the hell with you guys. I'm gonna go home and I'll find
yeah,
people that accept me for who I am.
yeah, yeah. Well, I
Was
think,
it
go ahead.
no, you go first.
Oh, you know, I think hopefully that some of the churches and organizations are starting to open up a little bit to, you know, um, accepting and loving. And, you know, I myself do not go to church. You know, I feel like I attended enough when I was a kid for I'm good, I punched my card. But, you know, I just, you know, I would just hope for anyone that they go where they feel loved. You know,
That's
it's
the best. That's the best way to put it. That's a great way of
mhm,
putting it.
yeah.
All right. So, um, moving on. So you were drinking from 12. So when did it get, so from the beginning, was it a heavy drinking? Or was it just having a couple, like one
It
glass?
was really sporadic. And so, you know, it started to get more frequent. And at 14, my mom sent me to my first boarding school. We were living in Miami Beach, and my mom, I had kind of like an emotional meltdown with my sister and threw something at her. And I think my mom had had enough of I was emotionally volatile. I mean, I just, um, angry and had outbursts, and I don't think my mom really knew what to do with me. And so she put me on a plane and sent me to Cleveland, Ohio in the middle of the winter. And I went to an all-girls boarding school. And really interesting. Like, I went and I found the girls that drank just like I did, you know. And I came back home after I wanted to go back, and really I didn't have good grades. My mom's like, I'm not going to spend all this money to send you to this school if, because of course there I had like horseback riding lessons, and, I mean, this was like all these, rich girls, which I didn't fit into that equation. But and so yeah, I came home, and very shortly after we moved back to Ohio. So my mom and my her second husband, who legally adopted us, they got a divorce, and then we moved to Ohio permanently. So that's really, I think, like right around 15, 16, when my drinking really escalated. My mom's drinking was probably some of the heaviest in those years. And I just, it started off drinking every weekend, then I added LSD to the picture, smoking weed all the time. And then, by the time I was 16. So by the time I graduated high school, I was almost a daily drinker. I was drinking before school, if not every day, most days, for sure, drinking every weekend. Yeah. I mean, it was a pretty regular occurrence. I had one friend, and she drank like I did, and we just, the two of us were just, peas in a pod, and that's what we did. We just drank. I mean, I almost missed graduation because I was hungover, like just yeah. So and crazy. I think back and I'm just like, oh my gosh, how did I even graduate high school drinking every day?
Yeah, no, a lot of us look back like that. So your mom was also an alcoholic. How
Yes.
was
And
her drinking while you were growing up? Do you remember anything? Was there any, like, things that happened bad because of it?
insane,
Let
like
us.
insane drinking. She always had like, not like necessarily office jobs. She did a lot of sales, so she had flexibility in her schedule. My sister and I talk about like how we never brought friends home because you never knew what you were going to come home to at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Um, Very unpredictable. And Yeah, drinking a lot. And my mom was a blackout drinker as well. So, drink, pass out, which unfortunately I manipulated, right? I took her car, I went out all night, I snuck out, I did whatever I wanted, because my mom really wasn't my mom wasn't, on top of things to really pay attention to what I was doing.
So you pretty much had free reign.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and after high school, I did go to college, and I was in college for an awfully long time. I always joke that I majored in alcoholism and I minored in going to school. I did a lot of geographical cures at that time because, my mom had gotten divorced from my stepdad. And so I moved back and forth. I would pack my car and I would get on I-95 and I would drive south and move to Florida. And then I would get, my dad would get sick of my stuff down there. And so I would move back to Ohio, and I was back and forth. Not until I was probably 20 years old did I finally settle into a place, and I moved to my sister. My sister was the graduate in 4 years, not 4 years in one day from college. She was the achiever. She behaved, she never got in trouble, she never did anything. And so she was in school in Bowling Green, Ohio. And I said, well, I'm going to come to college with you, So I moved to Bowling Green. My parents got us an apartment together. And and I was almost 21. And so then the game really got interesting. The progression of my disease was crazy.
So you believe alcoholism to be a disease?
Oh, it's absolutely a disease.
Yeah.
If it wasn't a disease, that it wouldn't be in the DSM-5, and there wouldn't be insurance companies that would pay for us to go to treatment.
That's a great point. I'm like in the middle. I think it's a disease, but every now and then I'll hear an argument for it not being a disease. But because the only thing I could say is I also believe it has to do with your environment for some reason. Because I do these interviews, like I said before, you're interviewed 214. I tell everybody, almost 90% of us have childhood issues.
Well, trauma. So there are risk factors, right?
Yes,
For
exactly.
any
I
disease,
guess that's a great way to put it. Risk factors.
Any disease process has a risk factor. People just don't end up diabetes unless they're type 1 juvenile diabetic, right? So there's these risk factors that we have, and it's environment, it's diet, it's, all those things. And so one of the contributing risk factors for addiction is trauma.
Yes.
And so trauma, and that can be early in life, later in life, but trauma is definitely one of those things. And if we don't learn healthy ways to cope, same as with somebody, I'm also a nurse, so if we don't learn healthy ways to cope with those things and learn the proper ways to take care of ourselves and heal our brains and our body, if we get introduced to this substance that teaches us how to feel better, of course, it's going to be something, and it goes from the beginning, just the same as somebody doesn't start off overweight and become a diabetic overnight. It's this process, right? Our bodies change, and it goes from the want and the fun to the need and the necessity.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I believe addiction, the symptoms are behaviors, which people have a hard time wrapping their head around.
Well, the one thing I can also say that contributes to my thinking that it is a disease is we share the same symptoms. A lot of us have legal, financial, we do the same dumb stuff. We feel the same way as far as the reason we think we need our drugs or alcohol or whatever, maybe our addictive behaviors like gambling and sex.
Yeah. Well, and then you look at withdrawal, if it wasn't, there are some substances that are actually physically addicting. And so how can you deny the fact that, that's not some sort of disease process when somebody's physically ill or could die? I mean, when you look at benzo withdrawal and alcohol withdrawal, people die from that.
That's what I was mainly withdrawing from when I went to rehab. And I thought I was fine. I was like, oh, you guys are on heroin and crack. It must be terrible because you could die. And they're like, They said, we feel like we're dying, but you're the only one at risk here. Yeah. I remember the nurse the first night or the first few nights in detox, the nurse would come in every 3 hours to make sure I was okay. Mm-hmm. And I didn't realize it was that's so dangerous.
Yeah. 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 So, I went to Bowling Green. I picked a major. Finally, decided to go to school for nursing, and I got a job in a bar. And, over this course of time, my sister started to realize my drinking. She didn't want to be roommates with me anymore. I had several roommates that I would come to from a blackout, and they had left a note that said, I moved out. We just can't do this with you anymore. I was going to school for nursing, and this is about the time that I got introduced to cocaine for the first time. And funny, I remember people had offered it to me. I'm like, no, I don't want to try that because I know that I'll be addicted. I know that I will love it, and who says that but somebody who has a substance abuse problem. And so I did, once I started using cocaine, then really the financial strain started coming, because up until this time I hadn't been in trouble legally. I had, for my father passing away when I was little, I had a little cushy life insurance policy my mom had stacked away for us, and I was blowing through that. And when I was 25, I was 26. And I got called into the dean of nursing's office, and she said, Niki, you're getting ready to fail, and we suggest that you take a leave of absence from school. in a BSN program, if you fail out of one bachelor's degree program, it's not like you can just reapply to another bachelor's degree program. Like your bachelor's dreams in nursing are done. So she said, we recommend that you take a leave of absence. And very shortly after, I had somebody that I dated or hung out with or drank with. And I think that was like the beginning of the semester. So maybe it was like January. And very shortly after, I found out I was pregnant.
Oh boy. When they told you to take the leave of absence, were they aware of your partying?
No, I don't think they really knew what was going on. I'm sure they suspected, but yeah, no, they didn't say anything about it. But and this is the thing. I had, earlier in my college, I had a pregnancy, and then because of my drinking, I terminated it. It was not something that was in the cards, and I was like, this not something. And so fast forward, now I'm 26, and I had done some, like, taken some surveys online that you might have a drinking problem if, and one of them was like, one of the questions was like, if you drink alone. And I was like, I work in a bar, I never drink alone. So I just checked that off. You might have a drinking problem if you drink first thing in the morning. And I would be like, I never drink in the morning. You know why I never drank in the morning? Because I was up till 5 in the morning. So like, I didn't get up until 5 in the evening. So of course I never drank first thing in the morning, but it was morning to me. All these ways that I just really like downplayed my drinking. And then, when I found out I was pregnant, I was like, okay, this is the way. And I had been, I had that, like, that inkling that maybe that I needed to stop, and so I said, okay, well, this is a good thing. I'm going to move home with my mom, and I'm going to, I'm going to get sober. And I did get physically sober, but I didn't do anything otherwise. And so, I fantasized about drinking every day while I was pregnant.
Yeah, it must have been rough. I'm pretty impressed. A lot of women, I find that they quit when they get pregnant. There's something that clicks, I think, biologically, that it makes it maybe a little easier because they know it's not just them anymore.
It was God. It was not me. I'm going to tell you what, because I wanted to drink every day. I wanted to drink every day, and I don't know why I didn't. Maybe it was because I live with my mom. Maybe it was because I don't know. Maybe it's because I was in school for a nurse and I knew what I was going to do. And but
well, give yourself credit. Credit is due where it's due, and obviously, if you quit, credit is due, because it's not easy for an alcoholic or an addict to quit.
Yeah. So I had my daughter, and it was a really tough birth, and I had a C-section, and then I got a prescription for pain pills.
Oh boy.
And the bear got kicked. And she was about a month old, and I remember, so I breastfed her. I was at home. I was living with my mom. I wasn't going to school at this time. Her biological father didn't have anything to do with her. I'd never seen him during my pregnancy. He was a major alcoholic as well. And so she was about a month old, and I decided to stop. I was like, oh, there's a bar that I used to drink at, and so I stopped in. It was like 3:00 in the afternoon. I was just going to have one. And I think I got home at about 3 in the morning. And my daughter had been home with my mom, crying because she was hungry, because, I breastfed her. I didn't have any milk pumped. I didn't do any of that. And then when I got home, my breast milk was poisoned. I couldn't even feed her. And the irony of it is that instead of saying, like, holy shit, like, that you have a problem, I just thought, well, I went too early. I didn't have enough milk pumped. I didn't do this. I didn't do that. And next time we're going to plan. And that's what happened. From there, I was going out as much as I could. And it wasn't all the time, it was pretty, I would guess, like, moderate, you know what I mean? Like, I just I didn't drink a lot all the time, but, trying to fit into that box. My mom, she kind of looked at me like damaged goods. So that I was, I was a single mom, and that I had this baby and that I was never going to find anybody who was going to want me. So she introduced me to this guy that she worked with, who I had no real interest in, but in the alcoholic, self-centered, self-seeking, and selfishness, I saw this hardworking man who loved my daughter. I think first time I met him, my daughter was 3 months old, and he was going to buy me a house. He was going to, get me a car. He was going to take care of me. He was going to do all those things, and so of course I married him. Didn't love him. And as a matter of fact, I believe right before the wedding, he said to my mom, I know Niki prefers girls, but I'm willing to live with that. So I think the two of us were just as sick. He just wanted somebody to love. I just wanted somebody to take care of me. And then my drinking really progressed because now I had a built-in babysitter. I started going back to school for my nursing degree. I was, drinking all the time. I was not coming home at night. And we had been married 13 months, and the last straw was I had stayed out all night, and I came home in the morning and he was like, you have to go somewhere and I don't care where you go, but I'm going to help you get there because I can't do this anymore. And he did. He helped me move down the street. He helped me get an apartment. And of course, now I could just drink the way that I wanted to, except the fact that I was a single mom to a 3-year-old. And it was, how children's services never got involved in my life. I have no idea. I have no idea. I did graduate from nursing school, and at this time I got a job as a nurse. And so I was working as a nurse. And of course, right as I celebrated my new job, I hadn't done any cocaine since I had been in college. And of course, to celebrate, I said, well, I should get an 8-ball. And so once of course, then I poked that beehive. Now I'm making good money as a nurse, and I, started using cocaine again on a regular basis. And I don't care what kind of good money you're making. If you're using cocaine all the time, you don't have a whole lot of money.
No. The more you make, the more you spend.
Yeah. It was like, so that for people who are old enough to remember that commercial, or it's just like that slow going boat that's just going down the toilet. And it's like, I work so I can make money, so I can do cocaine, so I can go to work. I do cocaine so I can go to work, so I can make money. It's just like this vicious cycle. So
yeah, I used to love cocaine.
Yeah. So, a year into my nursing career, I had a surgery. And also important is that at the bar, I met this guy, and he drank like I did. And 6 weeks later, we went to Kentucky and we got married. And we proceeded for the next, let's see, it's 92, I'm trying to think of 2002 to for the next 6 years, pretty much. I don't know how we didn't kill each other with our drinking and drugging, but we just, it's all it was. We had nothing else in common except getting high and drinking. So he was a lot of times unemployed, very manipulative on my part. I was making all this money, and I was like, I pay the bills and you don't do anything. And feeling like I had this upper hand in this relationship. So I was really mean and abusive, and had a surgery for the pain pills. And then of course they stopped giving you the prescription after you have the surgery. And then, so that's when my buying pills started and my opiate addiction really kicked off. I was just like a Roomba vacuum cleaner. I'm telling you, like at work, if somebody would have told me a prostate pill was going to get me high, I was the addict that would have like crushed it up. I would have snorted it. I would have smoked it. I'd done whatever. And if it didn't happen the first time, I had to try it again the second time, just in case, like I just was anything that I could do to be high. I was high at work. I would go to work drinking. I would go to work hungover. By God's grace, I never killed anybody. I worked in an intensive care unit.
Yes, definitely by the grace of God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, anonymous phone call was made to my job. And it said that you have a nurse that's smoking crack and stealing morphine. Because at this point, somebody had introduced me to freebasing it, which I didn't know anything. Like, I'm I lived in suburbia, so I didn't know anything about that. They were like,
Freebasing
oh,
with cocaine.
yeah, yeah. So, I mean, basically I was smoking crack and I was doing a horrible job at it. I would smoke up an 8 ball and in the night. I didn't know what I was doing, it was like, so I got called into human resources. I had been there 5 years, and I was escorted off the property by security. And most people would say, maybe, Niki, you have a drinking problem, you have a drug problem. And I didn't. I got my car and went to the bar. So, as a nurse, when anything like that happens, you have to get the nursing board involved. And so then I met with the nursing board. I got put on administrative leave from work, and met with the nursing board several months later, and we went over the charges that they had. He only asked me to admit to 4 instances where I'd taken medication, because see, by this time I was taking meds from the hospital every day, all day, taking IV meds, anything I could get.
So you were shooting up and everything.
Well, I wasn't at this point. I wasn't shooting up, so I was skin popping, what they call, like giving myself IV meds, like insulin. So I was, I held myself to this esteem that I'm like, I'm not a junkie, right? I didn't put it in my vein. I didn't. So I would research all the medications that I could steal from the Pyxis that I could do subcutaneously. So basically under my skin, because I didn't want to be that person. I wasn't that bad, to use a needle in my vein. Later on, going through like an intensive program, they were like, look, anytime you draw up drugs and you put in a needle and you stick it in your body, like you're using drugs intravenously, like you know what I mean? Like, I just thought I was so much better. I didn't think I was smoking crack because I was just putting it on foil with baking soda, and I was freebasing it. Like, well, I made myself seem like I was this glamorous, like I'm not sticking a needle in me. I'm not,
Isn't it amazing the way we think when we're in the middle of addiction?
I mean, insane. And, so I got put in a program for nursing. And then I got, several months later, I was indicted by the grand jury in my county for 2 counts of illegal processing of drug documents and 1 count of drug theft. So they only picked up 3 of the 4 charges that I admitted to. I went to court. They gave me this drug court program. And so, I'm 36, maybe 35 at the time. I'd never been in trouble. I don't know anything about probation. I don't know anything about the nursing board's probation. They're going to drug test me. I have to pee in the cup and all that stuff. I had no idea that they could test for alcohol in your urine, So I'm failing at the nursing board because they're catching me with alcohol, because see, I could understand the drugs were a problem, but I couldn't understand that alcohol was. So what I would do is I would drink, and I would set a timer, and I would stop drinking by 11 o'clock, thinking I would be good by the next day to go to this probation thing and blow in their little thing. And I wouldn't fail any drug tests because I wasn't taking any pills or using any drugs. And so, the nursing board was testing my urine for alcohol, which I didn't even know it was a thing, So I was getting ready, like the nursing board, I was struggling with that, and I was struggling with probation. I was forging meetings. I was drinking before meetings. I was just really having a hard time. So I made this executive decision that I was going to surrender my nursing license, thinking that if I just went back when I got my life together, I could go back and get it reinstated. What I didn't realize is that when you surrender a nursing license and you're already in one of their programs in Ohio, they permanently for a lifetime revoke it.
That's no good.
I had worked my whole life to be a nurse, and I didn't know that then. However, that was in January, and 2 months later, I went to drug court, and I had a very strict judge, and he said, Miss Ripple, I told you that if you didn't complete this program, I was going to send you to prison. And he said, I terminate your probation and sentence you to 54 months. Good luck. So I'd never spent a night in the county jail, and I went to prison for 4 years and 3 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
That must have been a wake-up call.
It was, it wasn't. And this is the crazy thing. It was not. I was pissed. I was angry. I was self-entitled. I couldn't believe this had happened to me. I had friends of mine who were nurses. They were getting like chump change probation and they were getting to go to rehab. And I said, I never got any of those things. And I was mistreated. I was the victim, you know? And so then of course, you know, my mom starts to feel bad because, you know, she buys into my shit thinking that, you know, like I was treated unfairly. And so I go to prison and my mom, because of, I think, some of her own stuff, and we've talked about this, you know, she felt bad maybe that she had contributed to some of my problems. So what she did is she showered me with gifts. So the whole 4 years I was there, it was all about, because I was in this really lax prison in Ohio. I need my hair done. I need new shoes. I need a food box. I need a clothes box. I need a chicken dinner. I need me. Come visit me, bring my daughter. Because, you know, this is the thing. Like, my daughter went to school when she was 9. I said, I'll pick you up from school. And I never came back. I never came back. And now all of a sudden, you know, I'm asking my mom to bring my daughter. It's an hour-and-a-half drive to the prison every 2 weeks to come and visit me. And my daughter went home crying after every visit. And I was so selfish, I didn't even care. I was all about me. I want to see my daughter. I don't care that she's upset. I don't care if she's having a hard time, you know? And so in prison, I actually, you know, those people, places, and things, well, that geography changed, you know? So now I'm incarcerated with people who, you know, who had done different things, who had been to different places. And the stakes, I anteed up, you know? And for the first time in my life, though, I was ever substance free. First time in my life, I ever realized I was a lesbian. So I was like, okay, the drugs and the alcohol, they're what made the men in the relationships in my life tolerable. In the absence of drugs and alcohol, I could see that I had no desire to be with a man. So, you know, of course, probably not the most opportune time to tell my mom that I was a lesbian, and that, by the way, my first girlfriend was this girl who was, you know, an 11-time felon and who was 6'1" and black. Oh yeah, that would, you know, my mom was a little upset, but anyways, you know, I made this girl Jackie my higher power, you know, and she was a heroin addict, a lifelong heroin addict, and had been incarcerated numerous times for theft, you know. And so she got out earlier than I did. And, you know, because I played AA, I went to the little meetings, you know, I did a little 12-step group. But when I came home, I had no God, I had no sponsor. I had no understanding of the powerlessness of my disease. And I had this girl who was a heroin addict who I had made my higher power, you know, and within a month, really interesting. I took some over-the-counter diet pills because I gained a lot of weight when I was incarcerated. And when I got home, I took some diet pills I bought from like the gas station or something. And the obsession to drink overtook me. Like, it was crazy how when you put any substance in your body, something lit up, you know. And I was like, man, I really want to drink, you know. And it wasn't very long afterwards I started drinking, and that moderated for a little bit. Until then, I was like, oh, well, I'm going to take a pain pill. And, oh, I'm going to, you know, somebody offered me a Suboxone strip. And I was like, well, it's not an opiate, you know. And I, remember with Jackie, she's full blown in her heroin addiction. And I kept like having this curiosity about it. Because, I mean, I'm 40 years old now. I get out of prison, I'm 40 years old. And I remember, you know, first time in my life I ever saw a crack pipe, you know, and I remember her having this and saying like, let me hit that, or her offering it or something. And I remember saying, you are not going to like the person I'm about to turn into. Clear as day, sitting there on the porch. And I knew it was coming, you know. Very shortly after, you know, I started using heroin. And look, that toboggan chute to hell went real fast. I mean, like within a couple months, within 4 months, 5 months, we were homeless, sleeping in the car. I quit my job. I had gotten down to like 89 pounds. I think the first time I went to detox was maybe like 5, 6 months into, using heroin. By this time, really, I had stopped drinking, and was, strictly using heroin and cocaine, smoking crack every day, and introduced to shoplifting. I had never shoplifted. I maybe shoplifted a lipstick when I was a kid, but at this point I had no means of making money, and I had this horrible habit every day. And I remember, that was Jackie's thing, and I'm not faulting anything of her, because all the decisions I made were my own. However, when you're with people, you learn different things and you do different things. And I remember the first time I shoplifted, I was sick, and she said, if you're sick, we don't have any money and you're going to have to get in there and steal something. And that then became almost this secondary addiction too, like the thrill of the chase, the getting, like the Narcotics Anonymous says, the getting and using and means to get more, it was just, I couldn't go to bed unless I knew I had heroin in the morning to get out of bed. I couldn't function during the day unless, I had so much to be able to use. In and out of detox, I would go to detox and I would spend a week there taking showers, eating snacks. They would tell me that they would have a bed for me, but it would be a little bit. I had to wait. And I would tell them I didn't have time to wait. So I would have the same people pick me up from detox that had dropped me off, and I was high before I had got home. Was this awful vicious circle. So in the shoplifting now, we had gotten arrested. Actually, the guy tried to stop me. Jackie said, I got a bad feeling about this. She went to the car, and of course me and my ego was like, ooh, I can do this. And so I went out the store. Loss prevention followed me, and a tussle ensued, and he tried to detain me, and I shook away from him, and I jumped in a moving car, and we got away. And little did I know that I was going to be charged with and indicted for aggravated felony 1 robbery and aggravated felonious assault with a deadly weapon. And that was in January that happened. And in March, I was arrested at another department store and found out that these indictments were coming. And I was indicted, on these felony 1, 2 charges. And my mom's like, who did you, and mind you, kept thinking like, okay, I'm gonna turn myself in, I'm gonna go to detox, I'm gonna get sober. And I could just never do it, and my sister pulled some strings for me. She got me a bed at this well-renowned sober house treatment center. It's called the Edna House in Cleveland, Ohio. And I got there, and I only stayed 5 days. I wasn't willing. I wasn't honest. I'd snuck, some Klonopins in and clonidine, and thinking I was just going to detox myself. And, by day 4 hit, and I couldn't do it anymore. I left. And I finally turned myself in on May 28th of 2014. I'd had enough. Like, I had that feeling of impending doom. I knew I was going to, I wanted to die every day. At this point, I was suicidal. I wanted to die, but I was too chicken to do it. I just hoped that the drugs would. And one day I woke up and I didn't want to die. And I don't know what changed. And I called my mom, who had been like desperately looking for me. And she showed up. She had a U.S. Marshal around the corner, just in case I changed my mind. And she took me to the county jail. And I turned myself in on these serious warrants. And my sobriety date is May 29th of 2014. Yeah.
So basically, it sounds like that was your rock bottom that made you decide you needed to change things.
At that point, I'm gonna be honest, Jim, I wasn't ready that day. I know I didn't want to die, but I really didn't want to be sober. So I got into the county jail, and after I crawled out of my cell like 5 days later from being sick and finally took a shower, I went to the phone and I called my mom. And I said, Mom, I need you to give me $25 so I can buy some shampoo while I'm here. And she said, I put $25 on this phone to tell you to go yourself. And I'd rather give $10,000 to a bum under a bridge. And I don't know what you're going to do, but you better figure it out. If you call me again, I'll block the number. If you write me, I'll throw it in the garbage. And if you write your daughter, I'll throw that in the garbage. Good luck, Niki. And she hung up. And the despair really started to set in. See, because the first 4 years, like, I didn't want for anything, right? You know, and here I'm thinking I'm going to go back to jail and I'm going to be okay. And I'm just going to eat some snacks and my family will come visit me. And, you know, I mean, really, like, I had this mindset of like, I can do time. I wasn't even afraid of going back to prison, you know? My girlfriend, Jackie, was downstairs. We were co-defendants on this case and she was going to prison too. And so I'm sitting in the people had smuggled a bunch of drugs in and everybody was sitting there. And I had just thought like, oh my gosh, I can't live like this. And I just witted this half-witted prayer, like, God, just please help me. And the next day, this lady came in who was from Heroin Anonymous. And she said, you know, Niki, if you would quit using drugs and drinking, you would quit coming to jail. It was like mind blown. Like I had never really put that together, you know? And she gave me the address to a P.O. box. And she said, you know, if you want help, write this place. And I had one free envelope and I had no family. I had no friends. And I had the willingness. I knew I was going back to prison. I'd been sentenced 2 years. And I wanted a pen pal. I'm gonna be honest. I wasn't even like, yeah, I'm going to get sober. I just wanted somebody to write me. And so I wrote the P.O. box for Heroin Anonymous to their H&I committee. And I got a letter from a girl named Amanda, who was a nurse just like I was, who was a heroin addict, alcoholic, just like I was, and who had worked the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous and gotten better, and she would help me if I wanted to get better. And we worked the steps through the mail.
Really?
Yeah, we worked the steps through the mail. She sent me a big book, and I would write, you know, she would send me the assignment, and she sent me envelopes, and I would send them back to her. She would go over them, and then she would send it back, and then send me the next assignment. And when it got to, you know, the third step prayer, I woke up in the middle of the night and I hit my knees because I didn't want to see, God forbid, anybody saw me praying in the prison. You know, I just said, okay, like, I don't know what you have planned for me. I don't know what this even looks like, but I'm just going to do it because I said to do it. That was how it started, you know. The God that I believed in didn't love me because I was a lesbian. And I didn't even know what I was praying to, but I believed that something maybe was there. And right around that time, I got transferred to a different institution and my sponsor was able to come visit me. So I wrote out my fourth step. I did the fifth step with my counselor, who was actually in recovery. It took us a couple sessions because I had to schedule meetings with her. For my step 6 and 7, I wrote my character defects on my hands and took them into a visit with my sponsor to go over them. For my step 8, I made a list of the people that I owed amends to, and I stuck it in my shoe and I snuck it into a visit. Figured I'd rather go to the hole than die the way that I was living, you know? And I started making amends from prison. And you know, the last amends that I made was to my mom. She needed to see it. So I did 2 years in prison and then I came home. I was probably home for another year before I actually made amends to my mom. She needed to see some living amends. Yeah. And, you know, started sponsoring women when I was incarcerated, doing service work, holding meetings, really big difference from the first time I was there.
So this is the time that you decided to finally get sober. Your life needed to change.
Yeah. And you know, when I was coming home, I didn't have anywhere to go. So it was either go to a homeless shelter or go to a halfway house. And I had just the week before heard that one of the girls that had gone to the halfway house had OD'd in the bathroom, and I was like, I just really, so I begged the Edna house that had given me the bed, before I went to prison. I begged them to give me a bed, and they did. So when I was released, my sponsor picked me up and took me to the Edna house, and I did 8 months there.
How was that?
It was great. So see, I didn't know how to live in America sober. I didn't know how to be a functional part of society. I didn't know how to go to work without drinking or using. I didn't know how to get up and make my bed. I didn't know how to shower on a regular basis. And I know this seems like crazy, but I had been surviving for so long. I had really didn't have any idea on how to function,
No, I completely understand. I was the same way. Not showering, not brushing my teeth, simple stuff.
Yeah. So, the Edna house was very, very, very rigorous. I'm not going to say strict, rigorous. So, you had lights out by 10. You had to be out of your bed in the bed made by 7. You had daily chores you had to do. You had to go to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting 7 days a week. And you had to use a payphone to call to get a ride from a woman who was sober over a year to take you to that AA meeting. You couldn't walk, you couldn't take the bus. So you had to develop these relationships and make your own community. You could only ride with the same woman twice. So for the first 90 days of my life, you do group Monday through Saturday from 8:30 a.m. to 3:45 p.m. You have a little bit of free time, you have dinner, you have your chores, and then you go to a meeting in the evening. You get a 5-hour visit on the weekends on a Sunday. And if it's from 12 to 5, if you show up at 5:01, you don't have a place to live. That was the way it is, So what I learned there was I learned to be responsible. I learned to take care of myself and to take care of others. Cause it was kind of like I am my sister's keeper type deal, started to rebuild those relationships with my family. And after 90 days, you can start looking for a job. And I couldn't find a job. I was like, this is ridiculous. I have a bachelor's degree and I can't find work. And I got a job hanging pants in a factory at a tuxedo store. And I was grateful. My self-entitlement, I needed to be, basically to nothing to be able to say okay, you're not all that,
You needed to be humbled.
Yeah. And so I never forget, I didn't have a ride to work. The job was an hour. It took me an hour on the bus and a train to get to this job. And then an hour on the bus and the train home. And then I still had to come home and go to an AA meeting. And I remember marching in the office, who does this? And they're women who want to stay sober. What was I going to say? I was like, okay, I just went out, yeah. And, I completed the Edna house and I moved into sober living. And believe it or not, I stayed in some form or another of sober living until I moved to California and moved in with my now current wife.
And you've been sober ever since?
Oh yeah, May 29th of 2014. Been sober.
Long time. 8 years.
Yeah. Well, compared to the amount of time I drank and drugged, I'm like, but yeah. And I count my time when I was incarcerated. There's a lot of drugs and alcohol in the prison. I chose not to engage in that. And when I came home, I got my job, and then I went to school to become a chemical dependency counselor. I was a chemical dependency counselor for 5 years. And I met my wife through Cleveland AA. She's 13 years sober. And she was going to school at the Cleveland Clinic, and she came out here to California, and then I followed her out, and a year later we got married. So
congratulations. That's great.
Yeah. So yeah. And so, now I actually, I sponsor 4 women out here. I go to a minimum of 2 meetings a week. I hit online meetings as well. I do work full-time and back in the medical field. I work as a monitor technician in the ICU. But the gifts of this program, God brought me to California because I have an application pending to get my nursing license back.
Oh,
And
congratulations. That's great.
by March or April, I should be licensed as a nurse.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing the good stuff that happens with sobriety.
Yeah, yeah. My mom was just here, for 5 days. My mom and I get along amazing. My sister and I are best friends. I have a fabulous relationship with my daughter. I have a fantastic support. The meetings that I go to out here, women's meetings, I've just found it's my they really are the backbone of my life out here. So yeah.
That's great. That's
Mm-hmm.
great. So it sounds like we're getting towards the end here. Let me ask you one last question.
Sure.
Do you have any advice for people that are watching and listening?
My biggest piece of advice, they always talk about the how, the honesty, the open-mindedness, the willingness. For me, I had to reverse that. I had to be willing. I had to be willing to be honest. I had to be willing to even be open-minded. And sometimes that willingness is just like, it's just like a crack in the door, just almost like step 3, right? Like we have to be willing to entertain that there's something else that has a plan for us. We don't know what it is. It's just, kind of like you just kind of crack the door. They say keep coming back. I say stay. Even if you're getting high and you're struggling, even if you're drinking and you can't stay sober, stay. So because I feel like the women, they loved me until I was ready. It was, I don't know. It's just to be willing to give yourself a chance, willing to do whatever it takes. We have this amazing life. And we have no idea. Somebody would have told me 9 years ago I'd be getting a nursing license back. I would have told them they were nuts. I'd probably spit in their face, right? that I would be married and that I would be employable and that I would have family and that I would have friends and that I would be this productive member of society, that I would be asked to speak about a story of recovery, because I'm gonna tell you what, nobody asked me anything. I didn't have any friends. Nobody wanted me around, yeah. Yeah, to be
Well, I really appreciate everything you've opened up and shared with us. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Thanks.
How do you feel right now? You feel good?
Yeah. I always say that it's God's story. He just let me live long enough to tell it.
That's an amazing way to have an outlook on it.
Yeah. There were a lot of days I didn't think I was going to live.
Yes. No, I know, unfortunately, all about those days. I was talking with someone the other day and saying there's so many times I went to bed and I took so much stuff. I was just like, I hope I wake up. Because my biggest fear was my mom finding me dead.
I wrote many suicide notes thinking I was not going to wake up.
Yeah.
Only be mad when I did, because I had to start all over.
Yeah.
But life is beautiful. It really is.
Yeah, it can be. Absolutely. You just got to put in the work.
Yeah.
So did you have anything else that you want to add in? Anything we didn't touch on or miss?
No, I think, for me, the key points have been sponsorship. So, whatever program you go to, you got to get a sponsor and you got to work the steps. Because I really believe it's the only way for me that I was able to make any kind of changes. And it was hard for me to kind of reach out to somebody and be open to somebody, because I was so closed off, but it has been one of the most beautiful things I've ever experienced. The 12 steps have changed my life. And whatever program, they're all the same, a little different, but the steps are there for a reason. I think that's it.
Well, again, I really want to thank you for doing this today. It means a lot to me.
Thank you. Thank you so much for asking.
No, you got it. So sit
Mhm.
tight for a few moments.
Okay.
And for everyone watching and listening, if you like what you saw and heard, go below and give us a like. Also subscribe to see when we upload new videos. You can check us out on all social media. We're on Twitter, Reddit, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. You name it, we're probably on it. I also suggest checking out our website, which is www.addicts-anonymous.com. There you'll find plenty of free resources and literature. So I hope you enjoyed today. And until next time.